Hi everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining me again today. We're continuing with our topic of Taming the Toxic Workplace from my workbook that's available on Amazon.com or my website, debhollandlcsw.com. Today we're going to talk about category number 3 of troubled coworkers and leaders, and that is criminal activity. I know that this is probably an uncomfortable topic or something that many people have never thought of before as impacting the work environment, but we've seen from the news, and some of us know from experiences that we've had or things that we've heard about, that criminal activity can in fact be taking place in a work environment, and by very definition absolutely compromises that work environment. So let's talk about this today. What do we mean by criminal activity? Are we talking about things like someone is speeding, or someone got caught doing some small thing that they should not have done? No, we're talking about heavy hitting stuff like being involved with weapons, being involved with drugs, assault, battery, those types of things that indicate some degree of violence and some sort of serious violations of the law. So we're not talking about you or your coworker that got a speeding ticket on the way in this morning. We're not talking about that at all. We're talking about people that are involved essentially in criminal acts, criminal lifestyle. So it could either be in their personal life, it could be them themselves that is committing some sort of crime, they could be involved in drugs themselves, or they could be involved with others, so essentially accessories to the crimes, whatever they may be, drugs, weapons, assault, whatever it is, gang activity, you name it. There's a lot of stuff that goes on out there, and unfortunately there's a small number of people that do bring that stuff inside the work environment, and that is really going to upset the apple cart. There's no question about that. Sometimes people go so far as to engage in their criminal activity within the workplace, that what they are doing, maybe they are selling drugs out of the workplace. Maybe they are bringing weapons into the work environment when they are absolutely not supposed to be. Maybe they are running some sort of an enterprise where they are the middle person, where they're not the one actually selling the drugs, but the people who are buying them are calling them to connect them with the person who is doing the selling. There's all kinds of crazy stuff that goes on out there. Any of these examples can be found in the really relatively recent news. So what are some signs? What are some things that you can look for? Because this is a really hard topic for people to think about. But again, along the theme of trying to look way out here and say, okay, here's the disruptive behavior that's impacting the work environment. We got to trace it all the way back to its root. Again, not to diagnose or judge or condemn anybody. We're simply, for the purposes of these exercises, trying to figure out the root of the problem so that later on we can effectively figure out a strategy for dealing with it. So some of the signs of criminal activity are a sudden improvement in finances, that someone who has struggled for the entire 20 years that you've worked with them, and they've driven an outdated beat-up car and they've lived in a modest home, is suddenly rolling up in some really amazing car, and they've moved to a huge house, and they are going out to dinner every night, and their lifestyle is radically different from anything that you've ever seen before, and it's unexplained. They didn't win the lottery. Grandma didn't leave them a giant inheritance, whatever the case may be. That it doesn't automatically mean there's criminal activity behind it, but it's a warning sign, it's a red flag that may be the case. If somebody is involved in selling drugs especially, and they have a windfall financially, all of a sudden, you might see brand new cars and rings and clothes and all kinds of things. Their lifestyle will radically change, so that's just something to be aware of. Another thing would be sudden change in friends, and not for the better. That this is a person who has always had a pretty solid group of friends, and their activities have been hunting, fishing, and bowling. And now all of a sudden, and those have been their buddies. They're hunting, fishing, bowling buddies, and people that you've heard about, pictures that you've seen of their trips, and you've known about these people for years. They've been good friends for a long time, and suddenly they're hanging out with people who are just really kind of a rough crowd, completely different than the friends they had before. And not a good change, not exchanging friends who were pulling them down in life for some reason, or friends who were involved in things that they shouldn't have been, to a good set of friends. It's the opposite. It's the reverse, that they had a good, solid, stable group of friends, and suddenly they're hanging out with people that most of us would refer to as sketchy, whatever that means for any of us. The point is that there is an abrupt change that's not for the better, just like with the finances. So finances and friends, those are big red flags. Another one, huge hallmark indicator, is suspicious behavior. If there are people who are fielding phone calls and they're kind of looking around and they're really nervous, and people are overhearing things, and it seems like there's some sort of a transaction going on, and then they disappear for a while, and then they come back, and things are just really weird all of a sudden, and you can tell they don't want anybody knowing what they're doing. And previously they had been, very upfront, open person, never really did anything remarkable one way or the other, and suddenly there's suspicious behavior. That is an enormous red flag. Now, that could mean anything from they're fighting with their spouse during that particular period of time and they're embarrassed and they don't want anybody to hear the tense phone calls. It could be that a child is in trouble. It could be that a parent is sick. So just because the behavior is suspicious does not automatically mean that there's something seriously wrong, but it can. And so the important thing is, when on any of these categories, so far we've talked about addiction, we've talked about mental health, and today we're covering criminal activity. The really important thing is to think about, what is the baseline set of information you have about this person? What are you seeing now that's disruptive? It's not, we're trying to assess things just for the sheer sport of it. Nobody has the time or interest in doing that. But the behavior that's disruptive, how does this fit in with or contrast to the baseline behavior you've been familiar with for however long you've known the person? And that's how you begin to get to the bottom of these things. So later on, we're going to talk about strategies for dealing with this. Criminal activity is kind of a special case. You have to deal with that extraordinarily carefully, because people who are engaged in that are not thinking about others. They not only disrupt the work environment, they can completely corrode it, and they can become very dangerous when whatever benefits they're getting from whatever they're involved in become exposed or compromised by the person who's speaking up. So we're going to talk about this in more detail later on, but for today, you've got some ideas about what to look for, how to recognize some things that you might be seeing in the work environment, and really how to think things all the way through so that we can figure out how to make your work life better, and leaders, so that we can help you figure out how to make life better for your team. Thanks again for joining me. I will see you next week, and we will cover the next category, which is drama stagers. I promise that's going to be a fun one. In the meantime, come on over and join me online on my website, debhollandlcsw.com, or join me on Facebook, Deb Holland PhD. I've got fresh new content for you guys every single day. I'd love to see you there and connect. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.